housing and homelessness. Okay, within our diversion services, the essence of what we're all about is getting to those root causes, helping, supporting, treating, educating people to get to those things that really matter, that their needs are, their vulnerabilities are, to make sure they get those things that they need to make positive changes in their life, diverting them away from the criminal justice system. All about reducing trauma for those individuals, but also reducing trauma for the individuals who work with those individuals as well. Okay, so we very much take a whole system approach to the criminal justice system. We have services and we work across the whole spectrum. So the main ones I'm going to focus on today are divert, and I'm going to touch on our CARS service as well, which is our arrest referral service. But this is where we work, because diversion is all about the right intervention at the right time, meeting people where they're at, no matter where they are in that spectrum, that journey along the criminal justice system. What we really want to do is that divert, that pre-arrest, that really early intervention. And that's the one I'm going to talk about mainly about you with today. But we do, like I say, offer these services across the whole spectrum, whether they're on the street with divert, whether they're in police custody with our arrest referral services, whether they're at court, making sure that there's alternatives to prison, alternatives to custody, through CSTRs, through DRR, ETR schemes. We're all about educating magistrates and getting those availability of those suitability assessments so that people get the opportunity to get into treatment rather than ended up in prison and custody. But if people do end up in prison, and rightly so, obviously depending on the appropriateness of what they've committed, we're there as well. It's all about turning things around there. You have your captive audience there in prison. So much more can be done in terms of rehabilitation in prison, and that's what we're all about, trying to get those services and offer them to people in custody so they don't end up coming back. So really just underneath all that is really that pure kind of harm reduction approach, but really, like I said, getting those interventions for the individual really person-centred. So our aims in diversion is all about freeing up time for those services, for the police, for the courts, to do those real things that need to be done appropriately, of course. So freeing up police time so they can spend more time on those serious offences, investigating those most serious of crimes. Freeing up time in courts, because obviously our courts are so backlogged, our prisons are overflowing, we need alternatives. But key to it all is getting that support, individual support to the people who need it. They're in the streets, in their homes, wherever they are, just making sure each person gets what they need, and so diverting them into those services. And the impact of that can be saving huge amounts of money, or taxpayers' money, so we can use that much more effectively in all the services that we deliver out there. Okay, I'll give you a snapshot of what divert looks like, and then I can talk about the impact it has on positive mental health impact it has on police officers. We have a couple of our divert staff here actually, so please do feel free to speak to them in the breaks, etc. They could probably do a much better job than me talking about divert, but I'll give it a go anyway. So what divert is, it's a policing solution to drugs possession, to simple drugs possession. So where an officer comes across someone through stop and search, on the street, searching their car, where they find drugs on them and there's no other serious offending going on alongside that, or kind of warrants out, etc. Divert is an alternative to arrest in those situations. So there's a really easy to use app that I'll talk about a bit more in a moment that's a great solution for police forces, and they love it. They basically have a really simple policy in those 4 forces we work in, which is, as I've detailed, West Mids, West Mercia, Warwickshire and Staffordshire. So the policy is, if you come across individuals like this, all the complexities are taken away, use divert. It's a divert referral. So using the app, there's literally a date and times on there for officers to refer onto, and use as a community resolution or an outcome 22, depending on the force, they refer straight into us. And that referral literally takes 3 to 4 minutes, rather than those hours and hours it would take to process an arrest. And then what happens in divert, 2-part system. First part is all about holistic assessment with each individual to find out what needs they have, and then referring, signposting them into those things. So it could be it could be drugs and alcohol, but often there's much more going on for that person. It could be gambling, education, getting people into education, getting people into employment, mental health issues, just getting into the things that those individuals need that are the root causes of their offending behaviour. And then the second part is an online group, very much education around drugs. Really powerful for young people, because we work from ages about 14 and above. But there really isn't quality drugs education out there. It's a very hit and miss depending on schooling, etc. So this is getting real harm reduction education to the people who need it. And then it's done, that's their interaction. And we've diverted them away from the criminal justice system, and they don't have a criminal record attached to it as well. It's a really simple but effective solution to dealing with simple drugs possession. It's currently being evaluated by the NIHR as part of their wider evaluation into diversion and drugs possession. So that is due out this year, so that'll be really interesting to get those findings there. We're being evaluated in West Mids, alongside Durham Checkpoint and the Thames Valley Diversion Programme as well. And Divert has really been recognised for its effectiveness, and it is now on the practice bank of the College of Policing. So for us, good drug diversion looks like this. The really important things are, it's about diverting people away from the criminal justice system, but getting them into that real core education, harm reduction, getting them into the support that they need, supporting people coming from the support angle rather than the punitive arrest angle. Swiftness is crucial, because there are some diversion schemes where referrals are backlogged. We've had it now and again as well, put our hands up, we've had so many referrals come in at once. But real diversion has to be swift, because it's got to be there and then. So with our app, there's appointments literally for the next day, the next few days, maybe maximum a week away. Because doing it there and then makes it real to that person. They probably forget about what happened otherwise. So it's really important that diversion is swift. We make that happen. But it's really about reducing the kind of impact on police officers, but just making things as easy, not simple, not easy solutions, not making things easy in that way, but making the actual processes as simple and easy as possible for really busy police officers on the street to have that. Okay, I will briefly touch on this, because I cannot do justice, obviously, like Neil was speaking about, those great examples, not great, obviously, wrong terminology, but those examples of moral injury and of PTSD. But this is what today is about. This is the situation we're in. Policing is an extremely stressful job. There's moral injury that most officers will experience at some time in their career, probably multiple, numerous times, and the impact on health is immeasurable. And often it is that drip, drip, drip of daily kind of attacks on the moral kind of code, but also just those kind of constant decisions that need to be made, and those constant pressures of those vulnerabilities and those serious situations that they can have daily multiple contact with each day. So anything that can be done to reduce those impacts is essential, and this is how Divert can help with police officers' risk of anxiety, depression, PTSD, etc. So I'm going to break through what our outcomes and findings have shown could be a positive impact on police officers' mental health. And what it's really all about is just different approaches to policing, innovative, compassionate, evidence-based, but all about treating drug possession as a health issue and an educational and a prevention issue, rather than a punitive issue and a criminal justice issue. So it gives that alternative to arrest that has multiple positive impacts on policing, saving officers time. It removes those kind of internal battles that officers have on the street when their days are so busy and pressurised, in terms of if they come across someone with drugs possession, do they arrest and everything that entails, or do they do a quick confiscation, a slap on the wrist, and no further action from there? And that could be a really difficult decision that officers have to make every single day. And in terms of those kind of improved relations, that obviously relations are really stretched at the moment between police and community, So anything that could be done to improve those positive those positive relations between police and community are essential. Okay, so this is in terms of the alternative to arrest. So as I've said, divert's delivered within the legal framework through Community Resolutions Outcome 22, and by not arresting, there's so many positive impacts that we have there instead of getting to the root cause of what the offending is and can be supported by our workers. So it just avoids that trauma of arrest and young people or anybody getting a criminal record that they wouldn't have had otherwise. There's a nice little quote there in terms of one of our young people who experienced divert and how it just showed that it's taken away the future chances, the risk to future chances in terms of employment, etc. And like I said, it's just giving those meaningful interventions, because that assessment is so key as part of our programme in finding out what those vulnerabilities are, what those needs are for those people to get them the support they need. And then the knock-on positive effects that can have to officers, obviously it brings in a more kind of compassionate and focused on personal people's needs and vulnerabilities angle to policing. It can really increase positive relations between young people and the families and police officers, because rather than young people expected to be arrested, dragged down to the police cell, they get given an option of support and treatment and education rather than arrest and pulled into the criminal justice system, which can just have a knock-on effect of like police officers, a core of what they're all about is making a difference and referring to us rather than arresting. Young people ending up with criminal records, fines that they can't pay, etc. This gets people the support they need, and that does make a real difference to what the police officers are doing out there every day. And like I said, this knock-on effect in terms of reducing that impact of moral injury. So through the presentation I've got a number of quotes. So these are directly from police officers of what they've said about divert. It's been pulled from the NIHR evaluation that I spoke about earlier. That evaluation is still ongoing, so we're really thankful that they've shared these quotes with us. But also just to be mindful that this isn't part of the full analysis. They just wanted to make that clear to everybody. Yeah. But these are really telling things about what West Midlands police officers have found divert has offered them. So in this quote here, clearly it's about just giving me the opportunity to divert people, someone in to support, rather than arresting, and that impact on arrest it can have on those young people's or anybody's life chances. Another key thing about divert is how easy it is. It's a really simple text solution underneath it all. Literally takes 4 to 5 minutes to complete, and there and then collaboratively between the officer and the person they come into contact with, they agree a suitable time, which is nice, rather than someone just being chucked a time they're never going to be able to attend. We have weekend and evening slots to make it easily accessible. And this app just sits on the officer's phone, literally takes 4 to 5 minutes. Police officers love it. And if you can make a police officer's job a little bit easier, isn't that the most important thing in the world? Because it just frees up all that time and resource to do their really essential day-to-day work. Couple of quotes here about how much officers love the app. This is really quite a key one though, because it's shown here that no one enjoys paperwork, but literally the officer is saying it's distressing having all that paperwork and that overload sitting on their caseloads, whereas the app just makes things much more simple for the officer to complete their job. Okay, so in terms of officer time and resources, so Policing Insight a few years ago tried to work out how much time it takes to arrest and process someone into police custody, and a very conservative 4 and a bit hours was calculated. Sometimes it can take many, many more hours than that, and I'm sure the police officers here in the room can testify to that, or ex-police officers. So the fact that divert is pre-arrest, gets in there before even arrest is required, and diverts into support, means that the whole arrest is taken away. And we have had over 12,000 referrals since we started a few years ago. So as I say, that equates to 51,000 hours of police time saved and done on other meaningful work, which is not small fry at all. Like I say, officers' time is precious, and it just really enables the police to focus on those public protection, day-to-day jobs they need to complete. And here's another quote, really talking about how much it can free up police time and how essential that is, as that police sergeant has experienced in using divert. And no service or intervention is worth anything unless the outcomes aren't there. And I wouldn't be up here talking about divert if we weren't really proud of it. In essence, it is voluntary because it is a community resolution or an outcome 22, but the hard work of our divert workers and the way we deliver it by being delivered through people, our really experienced, dedicated workers do the assessments and do the groups, whereas other diversion solutions are often just e-learning or videos, where it's left down to the person to interact with. This has enabled us to follow up people who haven't engaged, and for a voluntary service, getting a 71% engagement is quite incredible, and we're really proud of that. And we have been going for a few years now, and we are trying to pull more data around reoffending by working with the police forces. But the fact we've had under 5% of representations shows that people aren't going round and round the system again. There's a really positive impact to what we're doing in those assessments, in that education, to really make a difference there and get to those root causes and support people away from the criminal justice system. And just touching on here, that decision that officers often have to make on their really busy shifts, if they come across accidentally someone in terms of drug possession, and everyone knows it happens, whereas no further action is often taken in these situations, but that is no justice, and that can sit really uneasy, understandably, with police officers. But often diversion, as a model, as a thing, is talked about as soft justice, because you're not arresting people, their consequences aren't there. But again, this is meaningful interventions where people are they're not being pulled in to a police station and given a fine or a caution that sits on their record forevermore. They're given meaningful interventions. So that really can talk to making that difference, and the police and us working together can really reduce that stress and those decisions around NFA or arrest. We've given an alternative to that, a meaningful, evidence-based alternative. And here's a quote basically from a sergeant expressing exactly that. And this is a really key thing we're trying to get more and more data from working with West Midlands Police. But so far, divert has been shown to make quite a substantial impact on disproportionality. And obviously in terms of this is essential for policing now and in the future, but also for officers in terms of building up those much more powerful, positive community relations as well. What we've seen so far is before divert existed, in the West Midlands, 40% of people charged for drugs possession were of Afro-Caribbean background. But in those first 2 years of divert existing, that charge has gone down to 11% because there's now that alternative. Obviously there's the issues around stop and search. More non-white backgrounds tend to be throughout the country stop and searched, but divert can get in between there and divert all those individuals away to support rather than ending up with police charges. Now, there's a lot more work we need to do here in building this evidence base and these outcomes, but it's looking really powerful and important so far. Okay, before I finish, I'm just going to touch on our arrest referral service briefly. So, really, last year in the pay and morale service by the Police Federation, it was found that there are particular roles in the police force that are much more stressful and have much more morale with doing those roles within those officers. One of those ones that came out kind of above most of the rest was those in police custody. And obviously, working in police custody has many issues and facets around it. But we offer our cars arrest referral service throughout the West Midlands. We've just launched in Warwickshire, and we're just mobilising for Darren. And what we're doing there is giving a different way, a different approach to people who are arrested, and offering there and then, by having workers there at those custody blocks, working on the drug test on arrest programme, but also, maybe even more importantly, doing all those voluntary sweeps of those cells to find out what's going on for those people, being a really compassionate, positive presence in the custody blocks, and just there to help divert people and refer people into their needs for when they're released from police custody. So taking that really compassionate, diversionary approach, and not doing it in any kind of postcode lottery. It's fantastic that West Midlands have commissioned us to just work with who's ever in the block. If you are arrested in West Midlands, everybody gets this support. It doesn't matter where you live. It's about getting those people. We have people from Newcastle, Devon, London, but we still work with those services to get people into their local support services. And we are actually just at the moment piloting an advanced opiate replacement treatment, opiate substitution treatment option, whereby we have one of our nurses at one of our treatment services sit in the block at Oldbury, and if someone who isn't on opiate substitution treatment but they are interested, we start them there and then. So they come in a very bad way into custody. If they're just released without treatment, it can often be very high risk, but we're there to get them started on treatment immediately. And with everybody we see in the custody suites, we also offer naloxone, so it's essential that we do that. Okay, so just closing. What we're all about at Cranstoun said is our right intervention at the right time, making sure people and communities have what they need, but by working with the police to do this, we can build up much greater levels of public trust and public perception of police, and working together can only help, maybe sometimes in small ways, but they're the most important sometimes, in reducing that stress of day-to-day policing on the officers. And if we have healthier police officers, we have healthier police forces, and much more safer and healthier communities. So thank you for your time, everybody.
We're taking questions later, Neil. No, for you guys. Yeah, taking time.
Yeah, sure. So if anybody has any questions, please do.
I'll carry the mic over if it's all right. We've got another mic, Chris.
Hi, just a clarification, I don't know what the NIHR is.
Okay, you're testing me. So it's the National Institute of Health and Research. So it's done through education universities, but it's also a government kind of underbelly, kind of where it's from. And they do independent evaluations of research into all kind of services and schemes throughout the country. So it's totally independent, and there'll be a full report out this year. It's been ongoing for about 18 months now, so yeah, it's quite in depth.
Anyone else?
Cheers, hi, Nick Lynn, retired police officer and other things. So first of all, just to say, it's great that you're doing this work and diverting people in the first place, in the absence of legal regulation, decriminalisation, and all of those things, which are for the future. But I have a question about, what about the individual who gets stopped and is found in possession of drugs for personal use, and they haven't got addiction issues? They don't need support. They use it responsibly, safely, for enjoyment. How does it work for those individuals? Are you forcing them to go and see somebody, I wonder? And then my second question, maybe to follow up on, is around the race disparity. And I see there's a reduction there in arrest, but I wonder how that compares to the white population comparatively. Interesting to see that. and whether that work has been linked to the West Midlands Police work on the police race action plan. It'd be good to know that as well.
Okay, in terms of your first question, and it's very correct, we do get a lot of individuals with that kind of situation that you've explained. But just to clarify, it is quite a kind of brief intervention. So it's basically 2 hours of a person's time. There is the assessment part and the online educational part. And even the most hardcore, fully informed person about drugs and alcohol will say they get something out of that course. We've adapted it over many years. Its first version, they probably wouldn't have. But we've been working with a couple of really high in the field harm reductionists, experts in recreational drug use, from Bristol University, for example, Josh Torrance. We also have our own head of harm reduction, Chris Rintal. So there is, and we did realise we were losing some of those individuals at times. You know, we're like, I know much more than you do in terms of our facilitators. But we've kind of adapted that over time, and we put things in that we've all learned a lot about from Josh and Chris. So yes, we do get those individuals, but they do get a little bit out of it. And it isn't the most onerous thing. We're talking about a few hours in the evenings and weekends. So, yeah. Cool.
I think it's also fair to say that the data shows us. I'll use this one. Shows us, Nick, actually that interaction, when have they had any previous drug, alcohol education, very few have had any input at all. So if nothing else, make them aware of the potential harm to themselves. Longer term, it's obviously again where they see some of the benefits. So I think it's a real issue. The reality is if drug testing and arrest expands as they're talking about, which are taking other class of drugs, the reality is cannabis will be a key driver of potentially diversion out of that as well. So the point is it's got to be relevant for the individual, and the assessment bit is so important. That initial assessment of understanding why, and your point of because it's socially they like to do it, is very different to one there where actually we see a pattern of behaviour where potentially the health risk is increasing, being driven by other issues as well. In terms of the last one, we've gone wider than that, so we're engaged with Alison, MPCC lead for the action plan, to say, look, there's some national piece here that we want to do, some round evaluations, some work. So we're still working with West Midlands around the impact of disproportionality in the comparison, but we do want to do some wider work with them in terms of what that means to other areas. And again, the comparison of where diversity is not as probably as diverse in some force areas as it is in other areas as well.
Thank you very much. Can we have another hand for Cranstoun then? Oh no, sorry, we've got questions. All right, I'm jumping the gun. All right. Another 8 minutes. All right. Okay.
We're efficient.
I'm sorry.
We're efficient, aren't we? That's why. Yeah.
I'll absolutely give another hand for Cranstoun though, because you do so much work as well, supporting other groups and other programmes. So thank you so much for what you do. On the race disparity one, is interesting because we know that the conviction rates of white and non-white end up being the same. So I wonder if a lot of those people who are diverted in the first place, say from African Caribbean communities, actually are found to have no problem at all because the argument goes that they shouldn't have been stopped in the first place. So I wonder if the diversion is finding there is less of a problem than perhaps some in the police think there is. On the diversion side, I wonder if it's difficult because the police have actually many stakeholders to try and please. Arguably the first is the public, and of course there are lots of people in the public who might think the diversion side is a soft touch and they think that prison works, and I would have personal differences with that. But with that in mind, do some of the police forces you work with, it's great here in the West Midlands and neighbouring forces, but elsewhere, do they have that struggle of how it'll look to the public, that it looks like they're going soft on drugs, and is that a challenge for them?
So politically, this is when you get the challenge of police and crime commissioners, mayors and everything else, isn't it? Yes. And it is politicalised because depending which colour they wear is potentially their narrative of what they're going to say about what they're doing around drugs. So that doesn't help us at all because the stigma issue is a real issue. The reality also is it's evidence-based this, so it's great the police service keep talking about being evidence-informed practice, but actually we need to practice that at times, and that's not criticising colleagues, but it's very easy to say we are, but actually when you look at it, we're not. And again, the important thing, you've worked with it ultimately, is Nick, is the College of Policing. The college are the ones that are the professional body for policing. They should literally be helping and accepting capacity, so again, it's not criticism, but the reality is that they're the heart of to get that position where the right narrative is coming about what the purpose of policing is, which is to keep people safe, to reduce crime. Well, this does that. It does it better than putting that person probably through a criminal justice process, which we know the outcome is going to be worse long term.
And it is just really essential in some of the public side of things you spoke about, just to increase education and awareness for the public of what these things are, because it might be a great shock to the public. If people get put in prison for drugs possession, they're out 2 or 3 weeks later in a much worse situation than before they went into prison. So, yeah.
Hello, Chris James from West Midlands Police Federation. I just wondered what work was being done to get the message out about the positive impact that the Cranstoun Prevent programme is having to the officers that are using it. Just because I think the officers like it because it saves them time, it allows them to do the other stuff, but I think there's not as much knowledge about the impact that it's having on the individuals that are being referred into the programme, and I just wondered if there'd been consideration about how you could get that message out to them using the app or something similar.
Yeah, this is essential to make police officers understand the positive outcomes. Obviously we're commissioned by the OPCC, and we have West Midlands Police attendants at our commissioning meetings where we share all our outcomes and data and evidence, but it's how that is then filtered into the wider force and the officers on the street. So that is a really key piece of work that does need to be improved on. And it will happen over time, I'm sure, but yeah, it is essential. Yeah, well, retaking.
And it goes back to, so we're very fortunate to have regular meetings with Craig and with Scott, and again we put it back to them about what they are doing to share that knowledge base as chief officers as well, because relatively, let's be honest, some of this is cultural, about again people join the police service to make the difference, but that difference can mean different things to different people. I want to make another collar, and that's something I need to custom. Some may want to do that because it is the right thing to do. Some may want to do it because actually they're in custody for a long time and not dealing with other jobs. As we all know, some individuals, and again that's not a criticism, but that's a reality. But the important bit goes back to is making sure that that whole loop of feeding back, telling the story, because the reality is if people see the benefit, moving back to your point around meaningfulness, you know, they'll like to do more, because they actually see like, oh, this is worth doing it. One of the issues goes back to again is technology can do some of this for us. The reality is it doesn't need more than the officer, but it just tells them this is what's happened to that person. So again, it's what we are doing work with, but your point of we need to continue to do more work with it as well.
Yeah, if I could just add to that as well. Let's be clear, this is pretty new thinking. The idea that we've had, thankfully, to the work of people like Cranstoun, we've had the developing evidence that this is better for our customers, this is better for someone to be diverted than criminalised. You know, we've been presenting that evidence for a while. But to actually consider this as benefit to the officers' mental health, this is new thinking. So anyone in the audience, and I know there's quite a few, anyone in the audience online who's connected to human resources or wellness officers, and that's why you've come to this, then you need to be speaking to your leaders, to your chiefs, and saying, look, we need to be thinking how efficient, we need to have diversion, we need to be thinking how efficient it is, and how pre-arrest it is as well. Because there are different diversion schemes. Some diversion schemes that come after arrest, come after custody, and they're not really diversion schemes, are they? So if you're involved in human resources and care for the mental health of our officers, this is genuinely going to contribute to that struggle. And as I said at the beginning, this is only going in one direction of travel. You know, our problems have doubled in 10 years, how far will they go? So this is a significant help. So I think it's worth considering. This is the beginning, I think. So, if there's no more questions, thank you very much to Cranstoun. Thank you.